Haven't gotten my thumbs up. Is it off? Oh, yeah, because I don't hear anything now. Are you?
It seems good.
We're back on? All right, awesome. Good evening. It's March 29th, and we have a select board meeting this evening pursuant to a whole bunch of statutes that are posted, and I'm not going to repeat. We also have an executive session first, but before that, if everyone could join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. And so now I have to go find the motion, right, to go into the executive session? Under A. Do you have it?
I have it.
Oh, good. Do I have a motion? And I should have just said that. Do I have a motion?
I move that the board enter into executive session under MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, town administrator, and invite Scott Bragdon to participate. The board will return to open session at the conclusion of the executive session.
Second.
Because it's via Zoom. Oh, but I have to poll the board individually, so polling the board individually.
Yes.
Carolyn Van Tyne, aye.
Anita Mecklenburg, aye.
Kevin Calcutt, aye.
So we're in executive session. Great. That's right, because So, somebody dropped something heavy. An electronic device. Did it live?
It lived.
All right, well. Welcome back. We are now in open session for the March 29th Select Board meeting. Having done the Pledge of Allegiance, next on the agenda is public comment. Is there any public comment? I see none in the Zoom, looking for the little, and I see one in the audience. More than one? Do you have public comment or no? I saw your hand go up, so I'm not just signaling out because I saw you. Would you like to come up and join us at the table for your public comment, or grab a microphone for your?
We're gonna have Pledge of Allegiance first?
No, we already did that before we went into executive session.
Okay.
We have pledged our allegiance. We've moved on.
I'm Ernie Alex, 40 North Street. I got the first view the other day over the senior center of what the elevation looks like for the new fire station. And it kind of looked like a set for a B Western movie. I just could not believe it, that so many things were done that would just raise the price. My first comment was that this belongs in Dover. Then I took a ride over to Dover and looked at their fire station, and it's practical. So I made up a little report card. You have a very good architect, but when an architect comes into this town, a bag's is put over his head and his hands tied behind him with all the restrictions put on by different boards. And the head that board off in my comments is the planning board. So on this report card that I made, the way to keep a price down on building things, which for you that don't know, I've been doing it for over 30 years, big stuff, including fire stations. You need a cleared site that is shovel-ready. Not as the federal government says shovel-ready, as a contractor says shovel-ready. On this station, you get an F. No structures on the site that need protection by the general contractor, which also runs up the price. Here we get another F. No structures on site that will still be operating and open to the general public. That is a nightmare. Done a few schools and a few things where we've had to keep them open, and it just runs the price up. You have to have a special team. That's all they do is safety and check that the public doesn't get hurt.
You have 1 minute left.
Okay. Buildings to have as few jogs, hips, and valleys as possible. I didn't get a chance to count them, but there was a minimum of 12 valleys. Valleys are the first things to leak. Valleys are the hottest things as compared with a straight framing that you're possibly going to run across. Now, as a bonus, the fire station's being shifted towards the church, which is located west of the existing fire station. The area had been previously blasted as a parking lot. It is not structurally sound to receive a building. As I brought up to the architect, and he graciously gave me, they have an estimate of approximately $350,000 to reblast so it will receive a building. You know how estimates are, they're sort of like rabbits, they just keep moving on and on and on.
3 minutes.
So I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else with a public comment? Seeing none. Trying to clear out of my stopwatch. Moving on. Blythe, we have 2 discussion items for tonight, correct?
Yes, we do.
Would you like to tell us about them?
Of course. The first one is discuss the fire station building project, and the second one after that is discuss the FY23 operating budget. So at your request, the members of the building committee and our owner's project manager and architect are here tonight to talk about the project. get into any detail that you'd like to about where we are and what is included and why. We included in your packet, just for reference, the minutes of the working group meetings, which are staff and consultant level meetings weekly to work on every detail of the project. Those are in your packet. And there's some good Q&A in there about various points that have come up you might have had a chance to look at, as well as we included the very detailed schematic design construction estimate from the outside estimator, and that which looks like this, and that dovetails into this full budget that the architect and OPM have worked into, which includes construction and all the other soft costs, design, furniture, things like that. So I suggest inviting up the chair, Kevin Champagne, to kick things off, and I say the chief, other members of the committee, and the consultants are here to go any way direction you want to with questions.
Thank you. And thank you very much for accommodating me for our one viewer at home, I guess 2 viewers at home. They may have recalled that I was interested and had some questions last time, and I'm just trying to make this not quite so feedbacky. And you all very nicely invited me to your working group meeting the next day, which was at 3 p.m. I had a work conflict, but had hoped to watch and learn from it, but it was not recorded. And at not too long after learning that I couldn't watch what I had already indicated I probably wouldn't be able to watch in the real time, so watching it after would have been helpful, I started to hear, the usual rumblings. You've sort of seen, this wasn't a rumbling from Mr. Alex, but you've kind of seen a little bit of what I'm getting in my role as chair. It's not just because I'm Cece, right? It's just because I'm the chair that people feel that they want to tell me they're worried. And a lot of the people that I hear from are worried because they actually really want a fire station. I want to be very clear that there is nobody who thinks that how we currently house our firefighters is appropriate. But the fear is, especially as it comes in context, and we've talked about this as well, with the ask for the school. The fear is we're not going to get it. And are we doing everything we can to make sure that they are housed appropriately without it being too hard to, for lack of a more elegant term, sell to the town? And when I get things like texts saying this is the police station all over again, and not from the usual gadflies, right? Not from the people that you're like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I get it. Not from them. That's alarming. And when I go and I hear concerns about the working group meeting that I'd been invited to watch and I can't view it, I was like, I hate to do this, but can you come back? I didn't need everybody. I'm thrilled everybody came, but this wasn't a mandate that everybody come. But I wanted to hear more about that particular meeting because I had been told that it would be giving me information that I would want or need. And the minutes in the Q&A are incredibly helpful. That did a lot of the work for me, and I'm assuming posted on...
We haven't been putting them on the website. We put the regular meetings. These are not meetings. The working group is not the full committee.
No, I understand that.
Yeah, so we haven't put them on the website, but we could.
Is there any reason you wouldn't want to put them on the website? I understand that some of it may be, listen, I'm not a numbers person. I'm not an engineer. That's not the side of my brain that I function with or use to make a living. And so very high level, when I see things like square footage and angles and engineering terms, I'm like, moving along, but I'm a voter and a taxpayer, and then I'll stop at a word and it'll jump out at me and I'll be like, I want to know more about this word, because I know come town meeting time, there's going to be 6 people in the line to come up to the microphone to urge their friends to vote against it because it's ridiculous that we have something this word worth that amount of money. And so maybe to have it all posted on there.
Sure.
I understand that the counter to that is that folks like me who don't know what they're talking about will read it and, sort of like we did with everything else, immediately develop a PhD in communicable diseases like when the pandemic started. Like they all will have developed an architecture, a master's in architecture and tell you why it's wrong. But since we've been it's so important to be transparent, and whilst touting transparency, there was a meeting that people are talking about that wasn't recorded. I think that we need to sort of make sure that going forward, that the minutes are out there, and if it's a meeting where people are going to come and talks are going to get heated, which is good, right? Like, it's good to be like, that's ridiculous, or this there needs more of this, because it's sort of parsing it all out. So I'll climb back down off of my soapbox, and thank you for joining us. And I do love the ad of the minutes and the Q&A piece. Does that make sense in terms of what my ask?
Yeah, and I think the email response that I had to you kind of touched on some of that.
It did.
Was that, the working group meetings are, 3:30 in the afternoon, obviously difficult for someone that's working to make, but they're very detail-oriented meetings. They're going over very specific, layout. Where do you want outlets? What types of door hardware are we going to have? Where does this person sit? They're not, first, they're not committee meetings, and so they're not required to be videotaped.
I don't think I said that they were.
Right.
Sure, but I think you were questioning why they weren't videotaped, and I'm explaining why they're not videotaped.
Okay, it was just that one that I wanted to watch that I thought I was allowed to watch. That was
Sure. So the reason why they're not videotaped is because they're not required to be videotaped. They're not open meetings. They're not committee meetings. We certainly videotape all our committee meetings. There's detailed minutes put together for the committee meetings as well as the working group meetings. We can put the working group meetings up on the website. What I would say is that every other Wednesday at 6 o'clock, the full committee meets, and anything that comes out of these working group meetings that has a cost impact or needs a decision made by the town or might affect the building is talked about at the committee meeting. So there's nothing happening behind the scenes at these working group meetings that we don't know about, or that if people want to come or watch the committee meetings that occur at 6 o'clock at night in our videotape that they wouldn't find out about. So I would implore, if people have concerns about this building, and I understand, look, the building's expensive. The building has more square footage than was presented previously. Everyone on this committee is working really hard, and we are all paying for this building as well and want to see it move forward. We're not going to present something that we don't think is right, but we're also not going to reduce the building when we don't think it's going to be functional, and that we think it's going to be something where we need to come back in a not too distant future and ask for more money because we lopped an apparatus bay off to take some money off, and now we can't house all the vehicles in the building. It's just, me as the chair of committee, I personally would not feel comfortable with that. I feel that we need to present to the town, this is the right building, this is a needs-based building, this is not bells and whistles. This is what the department needs to function. And unfortunately, this is what it costs. Had we done it back in 2016, it would have been less expensive. I think it probably would have been too small of a building back then. And we probably would have been talking about building on, but what we've been tasked with is bringing the correct size building, or what we all feel is the correct size building, to the town. And, the cost is unfortunately a little bit out of our control, in that it's, construction costs, which escalate over time. And so we're just trying to get the right building done, right by the department. So I don't know if I answered all your questions, but to kind of go back, we can certainly videotape the working group meetings if you think that's helpful. But at a minimum, we can start posting the meeting minutes from that working group meeting. But like I would said, anybody that has a concern or wants to voice their concerns on the project, I implore them to come to our committee meetings and have themselves heard. This is not directed at Ernie. Ernie actually does come to our meetings, and we listen. If you want to come tomorrow night, we can respond to some of your comments. But I would implore anybody that's interested in the project and wants to have themselves heard to come to those committee meetings.
So, and I'm not trying to turn it into a point-counterpoint. I'm mindful of the fact that there's no mandate that you videotape. And I'm not necessarily suggesting that you take a working group meeting and open it to the public, because then it's not a working group meeting. It's a free-for-all, right? I understand that. But if you could record them, then when people are arguing that there is a lack of transparency, the answer isn't, I don't have to videotape it, which doesn't feel transparent. It's, here are the minutes, and we heard what you said, and we've now videotaped it, right? I didn't expect for them to be videotaped beyond the fact that I had indicated I really do have people asking questions about things, some of which I've seen myself and have answers for, some of which I haven't, and I can certainly go to the meeting tomorrow night, right? Is it tomorrow night?
Yes.
And ask them there. It doesn't necessarily need to be here, but when I'm hearing from countless people that I feel that it isn't transparent anymore, I feel like I don't think that's true, but I think that we have now to change the paradigm, or where it's next January at the special town meeting, and the answer is we didn't have to show it, or we couldn't make it any smaller, and then someone finds that one small issue that is a non-issue and turns it into the thing that completely turns it around. I'll use some examples. So I'm sure there's a reason why a lectern costs $3,000, right? But I don't know engineering, so the thing that jumps off the page at me is lectern. Well, I know what that is. It's just a little box, right? It shouldn't cost any money. $3,000, that's a lot of money. I don't need you to answer that for me right this second, right? But those are the kinds of things. I had someone say, when they were, I was reading through it and I was talking and I said, well, what's this? What's the, I can't find it. It was the thing I requested from you, which I'm not sure if it's in here, but you sent me like a list of, it doesn't matter. There was a whole list of line items, lots of words on it, some numbers after it. And one of them was a display case for $7,500. I don't know what is going to go in the display case. I don't know how you look me in the eye and say that it is down to no fat. Definitely the town is going to be on board 100%, and not think that someone's going to look and say display case for $7,500 and have 7 people at the microphone about it, right? $30,000 for a work table. I'm sure there's a really good reason for it. An island that fits more people than are actually on the fire department. These are all things that I'm getting texts and emails about, and it's not that I think that you don't need a lectern. Chief needs to get up and tell people what's going on. And it's not that I don't think that you need a display case. I don't actually know that you need a display case, but maybe you do. I don't know. It's the fact that I'm hearing about it, and it's March. And it's only going to get worse unless we figure out a way to answer those questions.
Sure. And first of all, when I say that we weren't under a requirement to videotape, I'm just addressing the issue of why the meeting was not videotaped.
Right.
I'm not saying we were avoiding videotaping it for some reason. It's just, yeah, in hindsight, if someone says, why didn't you videotape it? We don't have a great answer, but there's no requirement to videotape it. There's other committees in town that have working group meetings that are not videotaped.
Sure.
As far as going line by line, again, I think if people are having those concerns, the time to bring those up is come to a committee meeting and talk about it, and then we can talk about it.
And that's fine. And I'm not asking you to go line by line and explain every line to me, because my eyes will roll up in the back of my head and I will fall down. And luckily there will be lots of people here who can handle that situation medically. But I am just talking about the fact that some of the stuff that people are going to ping on, they're going to want to know. And not everybody is like Mr. Alex, who's committed to going to the meetings. And not everybody has that opportunity. And so I've said it and I'll keep saying it. I'm not ever going to say no or vote against it. But I'm always going to be sort of wrestling in the background, because, and again, Blythe and I had a conversation about the fact that people will say, it should be less expensive. It should be less expensive. I heard that it could be less expensive. They're always going to say that. And the question back, and I think Blythe put it, was, well, what should it cost? And they don't have an answer, right? I get that too. It's not fair to say that necessarily, right? Because if you were using 2006 money or 2016 money or through any of the times that we refused it, you could show, if you took that money, you could show town meeting how, how small, what fraction of the building, you'd have 3 walls, right? Like, I get that. I don't know that the people who are going to come and make the ultimate determination get that. That's an all of us problem. I'm just saying that while I'm not asking for people to go line item by line item, if there are things that a common sense person who has to budget and decide what they're going to spend and what they're not sees in the line items when they're being told there's no fat, so I get it. The answer is
Yeah,
come
I
to
guess
the
I would
meeting.
ask, what should a lectern cost?
I don't know.
Okay.
So that's your answer, is you say, but if you're
No.
coming back, you editorial, if someone comes back and says, well, what do you think a lectern
No,
costs? I'm going to be like, well, that's pretty flippin' transparent, and off I go.
No,
I'm
what
going to want to know.
What I'm saying is that if someone is interested enough in the project that they're going line by line and picking out a lectern, again, we meet every 2 weeks. There has to be a Wednesday that they can come.
So I'll come tomorrow night, and you can tell me why it costs $3,000, and you can tell me why you need a case that costs $7,500. I'll come tomorrow night with my list.
And again, I don't know that we're going to have every single answer tomorrow night, but we can certainly work on getting you those answers.
Okay. Anybody else?
No, I feel from where I'm not getting the calls that Cece's getting. And so from where I'm sitting, I've appreciated the work and the transparency. But I understand what Cece's saying in terms of this is something we have to market to our citizens. And sometimes those little things that don't mean anything can really derail a really excellent project. And so I definitely hear her point. I also have lived in this town and watched where I'm going to say, I've said this before, so I'm being redundant, but that I watched them cut rooms off of the HL of Day School. They took rooms out of that project and said, it's too much, you don't need this many rooms and golden halls and all of this, and they cut it way back. And now we have schools that we need to build because we don't have enough rooms. And so sometimes you can be penny wise but pound foolish. And so I'm pleased that because to add on in 10 years is going to cost this much again for one bay. So I believe in looking forward and spending the money now that's going to last us longer than spending less now that we're going to have to rebuild again in 3 years and try to sell that to the town, because that's going to be an impossible sell. And so I agree that times are tight and people are fragile. And so we do have to think about marketing, and I'm grateful for the work that you're doing for the town. And I don't know if I'll be there Wednesday night.
I can do it. And to be clear, nobody's saying, oh,
so
you can't
tired.
have a lectern, or oh, you shouldn't have. They light up that. You were chair, the emails and the
That's real.
texts.
I
And
get it.
they're easy answers, and maybe you're not going to have it tomorrow night, but maybe I'll ask them all tomorrow and some more in 2 weeks. And then in 4 weeks, there's an answer that says, well, here's why we need this. But maybe because we really don't want to lop off the school rooms, maybe this other thing can be, potentially sacrificed. If, remember going back to, we were talking about the plan B, like the Lego plan. Like, I'm not telling you how to do your job beyond the marketing piece, where I'm telling you that the voices are increasing and saying, how much do you think a lectern is going to cost? I get it. I would probably say the same thing. My Irish would get up and I'd be like, fine, you do it. But that isn't going to solve the problem either when we're there in January. And so I agree with you and with my sister select board member that you want to build it now in perpetuity. And maybe that's the answer to a lot of these questions. But I'm going to be showing up and asking them. Sorry, I guess. Sorry, not sorry.
No, and that's what we don't want people showing up in January when the time is to
That's
vote.
my
We
point.
want the people to show up now.
Sorry, I jumped your way.
And if they have an issue with it, let's address it.
But some
Maybe
people are
there is
afraid to
something
say it
that
to
can be
you, So
done.
they're going to say it to me, and I'm going to say it to you, so that we're not having this conversation in January, I guess. Right? I think there's some
Everybody
people
knows.
who just, and some of them, I don't even know that they are afraid or not afraid, can or can't go, it just wouldn't occur to them, right? They're just going to light up my phone. And my job is to then, and you and I have talked about it, is to parse it all out now, and so it doesn't snowball, or at least we know where all of the bodies are buried. Do you want to
Just very quickly, one of the things that we've all learned in this process is we constantly hear we have 4 people on a shift. But what the chief has done a great job of compiling is how many times, how often there are 10 and 12 people there. So to the point about, how big does the kitchen need to be? We love the chance to tell the story to people about how often we're really busy and there's many more people, because that's how you'd have to take care of business and be prepared. We did have a meeting at the COA last week. We're going to have one at the library in April and really get the roadshow going. And
Was it well attended?
about 17 people. Yeah.
Pretty well
That's
attended.
good. That's good.
And try to help people understand that this is, you might think that as you drive by and it's quiet, all's well. There's a lot happening that you maybe don't see. We'd love to tell you about it, so you can feel. Maybe the lectern is a good example of something to look
Well, and
closely
listen,
at.
like I said, maybe that's cheap for a lectern. I don't. To your point, I have not actually ever shopped for a lectern. When we went during the pandemic, when I had to argue in front of a judge at a lectern, because you still have to stand, even though now they.
Let them borrow this one and take it down there and start there.
I used a record keeper box and I put a little napkin over it and the whole thing, and so I haven't had to purchase one. I'd like one, but I'm not paying $3,000 for it. So with the little lip, I'm sure it's great, and it was a word that popped out of the page at me because it's a word I recognized, and I'm not the only one. Is my thinking.
But if you get the plywood one and it falls apart in 2 years, and then you have to get another plywood.
And you borrow
one,
my record keeper box. I'm joking.
I know, but sometimes buying something that's not the cheapest thing is a good long-term investment instead of buying 3 cheap ones over 15 years.
And candidly, that's a different question, really. If that's what a lectern costs, it's what a lectern costs. Clearly, I can't imagine anyone who wouldn't understand why you would need. We've all watched television, right? We know that the chief of police and the fire chief get up in front of their folks and opine, right? I get it. There's other things that maybe seem, to your point about the kitchen, that seem to not make sense, and we're not necessarily pricing the cost of plywood or what your finish is so much as the size or the need. And that's just another question. I can understand a need for bays. I don't know about display cases, right? Things like that. And I keep harping on it only because that one came up a couple times and I wrote it down, so I remembered it. And you don't need to answer it right now. I'm just telling you.
And I guess my main point is, again, I would prefer, let's just get this out all on the table. I know it's an expensive project. I know people are going to have questions of how we came up with certain costs. The time to talk about that is now, that potentially maybe something can be done if someone has a good idea, not in January when we already have the price from the contractor for what.
But do you understand why I sound like a crazy person? Because I agree with you that the time is now, which is why we're actually talking. But there are folks for whom they will have done the little bit and then they will have forgotten about it because life intervenes, and then they will roll in January, and whomever it is that gets their group most motivated in January to fill the auditorium is going to be the group that wins.
I get that. I guess it's difficult to really prepare for something like that when you don't even know what the issues really
So
are.
I feel like this is where I could interject a little bit. First and foremost, I've heard the word lectern more in the last 20 minutes than I have in my entire life.
It's a nice word, though, like as opposed to some words which are
something to stick
yucky.
at it.
Lectern, I like it.
2 years ago, we decided to take on the process for being able to pitch the town on increased zoning for town center. And it was a 2-year process that we went through where we had community meetings, we reached out, we did planning, we had consultants, we went through the same process. We had people that stood up and raised concerns like Mr. Alex just did. And we went through the process of delaying our pitch to the town meeting for another year just to be able to prepare, just so that we could stay ahead of all those oppositional points of views. There are going to be some people who are going to be in opposition to this project no matter what you come back with. That's just going to happen. That's the reality. But the more that we can do to not appease, but to address the concerns that are out there that people are raising now, the more that we can directly give them insight into how these decisions are being made, the better it's going to be in the long run once we get to that point where we're taking the vote. So I think what we're going through now with talking about transparency, it isn't a dig at the committee that you were doing something behind closed doors. It's more that an opportunity has presented itself to be able to give people more of a background insight into how these discussions are being had, where they're coming from before they make it into the form the committee has. I don't know if the committee necessarily goes into the detail of why this lectern costs this much or why this display case costs that much, but if somebody is so inclined to understand that, now they would have the ability to be able to chime into the video, watch in the background, and get that kind of insight. So I want to make sure that it isn't viewed as, oh, there's a big gotcha game going on right now, that we caught you doing something sneaky behind closed doors and now it's the police station all over again. I don't think anybody believes that. I think what it is,
No,
though,
we
is it's
just
an
worry.
opportunity now for us to be able to give people a clear look into how these discussions are transpiring and how they're contributing to the discussions in the consequential meetings at the committee. So thank you for being open to doing that, and greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it is not that, I think I even said that in the thing, that my concern was just seeing that word. I was like, am I allowed to say shit on television? No? Okay, I won't say shit on television, but I was thinking, shit. This isn't the police station all over again. Like, we've been talking about this thing like it's...
Right.
So,
Yep.
hence the, as some folks might say, DEFCON 3, right? Just little television thing, so that's it.
And I think we have to, again, recognize that the volunteer committee that we have is putting in so many hours, and thank you for those hours, and hours and hours and hours and hours. And thank you for that work for our town, and we're trying to help, and if there's anything we can do.
Thank you.
That's it. That was it for me.
Very good.
So just to confirm, we're still good to keep moving forward. We'll talk about internally about videotaping.
Yeah, no, I just wanted, because I wasn't able to, I wanted to ask some silly questions that I just basically voiced to you, right? Like, some were answered in the thing, but some were like, this is the stuff that I'm hearing. And I was told, watch the video, and then there was no video. So this is because there was no video. Not because I thought anyone was hiding anything, but because at the same time as I couldn't watch the video, I was getting the people who were starting to get concerned. And so I figured we'll have this meeting. We've now got our minutes. I think having the minutes is great. My personal opinion, it's just one person's opinion, has no more or less weight than anyone else's, is that they ought not to be open meetings, because that would be a disaster for you, but that they could be recorded. And then if people wanted to see, maybe they are watching or joining in the open meetings, that like tomorrow night 6:30 meeting, they've got more context. Because for some of the folks for whom that this is going to be the issue that they're most interested in, they are the folks who will have the time to drill down.
Sure.
So that's it. I've been very clear. I would never say, it's not my position or place to say no to this. I think that we need it, but it is, I think, my position and my place to pull at it enough that in March of 2022, we're addressing the things that are getting certain folks worried, and not in January of 23. So that's it.
Yeah, I think we're all on the same page there.
So tomorrow night's meeting starts at 6. Right in this room.
6:30. I thought 6:30. Hold on.
Right in this room, so we welcome everybody.
The working group meetings, are they in this room as well?
They're at the fire
They're usually
station.
at the fire station.
Do they have the ability to video record there?
It's a team.
It's a Teams meeting. I guess I probably should have asked that before. I promised it.
There's no microphone, like, it's not set up like this, so we can record the Teams meeting, but as you can imagine, those who are on Teams, you can hear very well. What we're broadcasting, in other words, we're sharing our screen, you can see very well. I will say that having been on the, Teams meeting while having this discussion, there's a lot of background, like you can't hear it very well because there's no microphone. Probably the way people can't hear me very well right now. But we can certainly record them. There's no reason we can't.
Yeah, because isn't Teams like Zoom where you just hit the little record button? That's all I was talking about, was just like
but
hit the record.
To Ron's point, I think he's saying not everybody has a microphone like this in front of them.
Yes,
That-
so you'll
Oh, well, that,
you'll get bits and pieces.
I mean, at that point,
Again, we'll also have.
I mean, unless you're, all the important stuff's happening in the hallway.
Doran Whittier puts
with-
together and Vertex put together very detailed minutes as well, so if there was something that they
That's
didn't
helpful.
hear.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
The chief wants to.
Thank you. I just wanted to take a quick minute just to, I think one thing that can kind of clarify a little bit of the concern is the schematic design estimate that was put together by PM&C, working with our architects, is there's a lot of information that is in that is, in essence, it's estimates, but it's also kind of placeholders. We are working very detailed and painstakingly and haven't got to the point where we've developed specifications for a lot of these items. And we have a dedicated interior designer who works for the architectural firm who will go through with us and guide us and steer us to what is the best option, or give us options where we're allowed to, we in essence will have a lot of say and control on what some of these items are. So when you see things like the lectern, like, I don't believe a lectern is going to cost $3,000. I just
That
don't.
makes a lot more sense.
I just don't. But I do know that a lot of this information,
On for 200.
a lot of this information that is in here is designed to give us a very, very conservative estimate on some of the soft costs, which are the area we're going to have more control. And, you know, I can promise you there are things like bulk file storage that we have went through and discussed to the point where we went and measured and looked at what our files are, and we cut like $20,000 because regular file cabinets are so much less expensive and we don't have the need for bulk storage. So there are things like that that we have done. Now, we have not done that to that degree with a lectern, for example, or
I'm going to be forever going to get
or a display case. But there are placeholders that are in this, and it is designed to be a conservative estimate, just that. Not that you're actually going to get a, you know, detailed design estimate that is going to have a lectern for $3,000. I just wanted to make sure that that was clear, is that, you know, I understand that. I 100% understand that. Like, it would be, you know.
Pretty fancy, because.
Right, exactly. And
that makes sense.
yes,
Thank you.
I just wanted to make
That's really
sure
helpful.
And I
that was
assume,
understood.
I don't mean to tell you guys, obviously, it kind of seems like I'm telling you how to do your job, but I don't actually mean to tell you how to do your job, but I assume from a marketing standpoint that you are going to be available at town meeting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and
From a
things
good
like,
sale-
we're going to ask your approval
selling.
to apply for a municipal fiber grant so that we can take that out of the project and get it through a state grant instead. You know, things like that. We're
Right.
looking under every rock for those sorts of things as well.
Right. Awesome.
Is it for $20 million by chance?
Sadly not.
$20 million off? $296 for a
But I will write one if there is one.
I don't know, I think it probably need to be we could put it on some cement blocks, though, to make it tall enough for the chief.
Thank you, Erin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess that's it for that one. Moving on to the next one. Get out of here. What, next?
Yes. So, we scheduled this, originally this meeting was tonight to talk about the budget solely until we added the fire station project. And so what Todd and I have done with some help from our various department heads is put together some ideas for cost reductions to close the gap that we have. And so if you turn to the budget document you're familiar with seeing, and you turn to the summary budget, you will find in there, in the right-hand column, a list of reductions that we're prepared to go over with you. And also Chief Kinney, Chief Stone, and DPW Director Blair Crane are here from the major departments in case you have any specific questions for them. We can start with, Todd and I can go through for you what we have put down for reductions, and we're looking for your feedback. If you like these or you're concerned about them, and then take questions after that. Does that work for you? Mm-hmm. Great. So the amount that needed to be reduced was just over $208,000. The way we have gone about that is we made one revenue adjustment by adding $10,000 to motor vehicle excise. Felt that was a reasonable thing to do without overstating it. The rest of the changes are reductions. And I will tell you that Todd and I have had, come on up, sir. have had spirited debates about these. We didn't necessarily agree on all of them, but together we said, let's put this package forward and see what the board thinks. So going down the page, we made reductions to the salary for the future town administrator by $20,000, as well as $2,000, assuming a new person might not be going to a national conference. That could come out. We made a reduction in some costs in the assessor's office, $1,000 for expenses. We reduced the salary for the future HR director, assuming you wouldn't maybe hire somebody right away in the year, and still felt it was a reasonable amount to hire that next person. In information technology, we've realized this year that we had what we'd budgeted for the shared position with Millis was a little more than it was needed, so we took out $5,000 in the salary line, and we're recommending that we take out $11,000 in expenses, which is basically the cost of the ClearGov subscription, which we don't think has gotten the amount of interest from folks as we had hoped it would. Facilities management, we backed the major maintenance line item back down to $50,000. We know the costs of things, supplies, services to repair things are going up, but that's always, some years like this year we're using all of it, some years we don't, so we're going to go back to 50. Turning to public safety, we removed about $28,000 from the police department budget in looking at what we thought were the future compensation of new people taking the rank positions when we have a changeover. Looking at those a little more closely and what will be fair but reasonable. We reduced $10,000 from fire and ambulance and overtime. It's always hard to say how much overtime you're going to need, how many callbacks, all that. If the chief is as busy as he's been this year, I don't know, that may not work out, but for now, that's what we suggested. Made a slight adjustment downwards in animal control. We still think it's really important to have someone covering weekends throughout some of the year, but made adjustment there. We made an adjustment to education, which we would ask that the Norfolk schools strongly consider. Their budget is the biggest part, of $14 million, and that's, as you can see, a 2.7% decrease. They may have some personnel change that might allow for some of that, though they're not sure. And then the last one is we recommend taking out the grounds position in DPW that we've been unable to fill. So that's worth $52,000. And last one is a minor adjustment in stormwater management, taking that down by just under $11,000. Still an awfully large budget. We still have a lot to accomplish there and make up some ground. But since exactly what we have to do is not all the way nailed down, we made a slight adjustment downwards. And those are all the changes we're putting on the table, which balances the budget. So we're here to talk about any of those or any ideas or questions that you have. We haven't prepared a presentation because we weren't sure what we were looking for. Todd, did I miss anything you wanted to cover? Or?
You nailed it all.
All right.
And so last time we met, just going right to education, you'd indicated, if I'm not mistaken, and I could be, that you'd received pushback on the ask of a reduction in their budget. Mm-hmm. Have you floated the 40,000?
Did you get a chance to talk to Ingrid about that?
We asked, yes.
Yes.
They said it would be a struggle for them, potentially looking at potentially a position that would have to be removed as an option.
So someone would have to remove a position. Do you know what position that they would have to remove, or is that the April 5th?
About half of that, they thought if there was a change in a person in a position, they would probably could come up with half of it, but they weren't sure yet. They don't agree with 40.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then I guess my question is, if they don't agree with 40, where else are you going to get it from?
At this point, our recommendation is a very de minimis amount of free cash to make up the difference. We just don't think that there's any other places in the budget without reducing, services or ability to get the work done. And, the one we're concerned about is, very honestly, is the grounds position. But we haven't been able to fill those. It's been very, very difficult to fill DPW jobs, and we have 4 people right now, and we're not hopeful we're going to have a 5th. So, service will be a challenge for cemeteries and parks and fields. But the reality is, we're not sure we'll fill that job until the economy changes in some way.
And that people are willing to get hired, like it's still hard to find people.
Oh,
Yeah.
is it hard to find people, sir?
Yes, it is.
So one of my questions is, I understand that you still haven't filled it, so it's kind of an academic conversation, but, and I know I keep going back to it, so Blythe knows where I'm going. Or if she doesn't, in a minute, she'll be like, oh, yeah, okay, that makes sense. When the determination was first made to have Barry and Blair, we were assured we wouldn't need a supervisor. Like, why in a town with 1 traffic light would we need such a bow-heavy organization? And then a year later, for no financial gain for the town, like it wasn't costing the town to not have it, but we ended up with a supervisor. So now an additional supervisor. So I'm wondering if that's a place where there's room, rather than cutting an educator in a town with an increasing population of children, but still the same sort of need for fields, which I understand is still a cause for tension, and there isn't a resolution. Is there a way to either train the gentleman to do fields? I gather he doesn't have that training. And I understand that you've cut the 50 here, so this is sort of not necessarily that question. But it feels like there's some room there, and I'm also wondering what it was like. Library has a change of 0%. Is that just an acknowledgement, or was there a consideration there, and then you decided? I just am concerned that we have a growing population of children, and we're going to need to have. We're looking to increase the school, and Ingrid is one of the. I hate talking about people when they're not here, but it's a good thing that I'm saying nice things about her, so I don't think that she'll mind. I don't know many people who I trust as much with a budget as I do Ingrid. If she says that she's going to do something, she does it. She always comes in under budget. She manages to save money everywhere she can. I'm really concerned that if she says no, can't do it, I mean, other than sort of the catastrophic events, right? Like we had, whatever, 10 years ago or whatever, right. I'm concerned that she's going to say no, and then I understand that the resolution is then, well, we'll just spend from free cash. But then my concern is that when I'm admonishing people in my career or just personally, can I afford that thing that I'm adding to my budget? Using an asset to pay for it means I can't afford it. And so going to free cash to cover a revolving budgetary expense feels problematic to me. Now, maybe I'm wrong, and Todd, you're the numbers guru. You can tell me I'm wrong, and I'm far enough away that I can't hurt you, and you gave me chocolate. So I won't hurt you, but that's my concern. Like, I'm just one on the board, but that's my concern, and so that's it.
The library had we already asked them, and they came back with $18,000.
Okay.
So they've
this
already.
is just a zero because it's on the thing. I just wasn't sure what the notation was.
They did step up. I mean, the education one was the one that Todd and I debated the most back and forth. And, I said to him, I think they're going to be uncomfortable with this change. And he, we both understand it. And his point was it's a large budget and things come, go, people come, go. And hopefully that is something that they could absorb. And I don't want to speak for Todd completely on that topic. Turning to the DPW, I think, if I recall the conversation correctly about when we took out the superintendent and added back, it was, we'll try it. We'll see if we can do it. And so we did for a year. And what I found was that there was a level of work that didn't get done because there's somebody still had to be organizing crews, following up on citizen concerns, making sure things get happen on the day-to-day level. And so the big picture things to move the department forward and things that town need to work on didn't get done. And an example that you probably are aware of is last week we had a meeting with the Congressman's office about, possible infrastructure projects, and there were 3 very thorough reports about these 3 projects we wanted. They did them. And if I didn't do them, I was happy to present them. That's the kind of work that doesn't get done if they're chasing all the little stuff. And we've got ARPA, and most of the money could be spent in public works going forward. We've got stormwater stuff to do, and I would be very concerned that we would not be able to be on top of that stuff if the director and the assistant are chasing the small details. And I don't want to say any more because I think Blair can provide all of you his own perspective. We wouldn't rather give up the grounds position, but living within our means is important. So that's why we suggest taking that out. And I, like you, don't prefer to say just solve it with free cash.
Right.
But I think we were truly at the point where we don't see another place to reduce without causing structural deficits. I could say to the police chief, just take out another 20 grand. We'll hope it all works out. But a year from now at town meeting, you'd be adding it back in because they were short. Or let's hope we don't spend legal fees or something like that. Those are all budgets that can be cut, but they probably won't be realistic. That's a choice. We couldn't do that.
Yeah, but that's saying the same thing. That's
Exactly.
6 to 1, half dozen the other. If I'm using the free cash now, or I'm going back into the revolving fund of free cash in 6 months because I've exceeded it, I understand that.
Yep.
I'm not, but that's the same issue. I'm still saying the same thing.
Yes.
We have places that we need to cut at. I just don't know that the school's gonna
Understand.
be the place to
Sure.
cut. But I'm
Todd,
just one voice.
Some thoughts?
Sure, so, again, trying to come back to the expectation, we had a $200,000 differential. How do we bridge that gap? We've identified what we kind of can probably get by with. That doesn't necessarily mean we're not gonna be coming back because overtime goes through the roof or whatever. I mean, we try and predict now for 18 months from now. It's not an easy job all the time. So you try and put those numbers in, and then to your counterpoint about free cash, well, if we don't fill it with free cash now, we need to make a transfer later. Using free cash, it's free cash for free cash. So one, it's a budget item, yes, cut back the expenses, but the expense that you're really gonna have to cut back, given our overall budget, because the expenses line items line up with what the expenses are anticipated based on contractual obligations. We're not even factoring into the facilities budget, all the huge increases with oil and heat and everything else that's going to be factored in. We don't usually use those things until December, January next year. So we're hoping that things kind of normalize and get back to where they should be. But, I'm hearing reports that this is going to continue on for 2 years, where we're at with these high oil prices. Who knows? We're speculating at best.
But isn't that also going to impact, isn't that perhaps one of the reasons that the school budget, that they can't, don't they have the same issues with
We all do.
buses and?
100%, yep.
On the town side, we lock into a contract and we buy, 5,000 gallons at a time? So I answered this for the Sun Chronicle last week. We probably don't need, fuel until June, July.
That's the town fuel though, not for the buses?
Correct, because
I'm
that's
just
contracted.
clarify,
But
it wasn't
some, no, I understand. Some budgets hopefully will be okay, and some we might be challenged. That's what's so hard about municipal budgeting is you're doing it now for a year and a half from now. And
We had conversations last week with the advisory board about, just throw ARPA money at the whole thing. Don't worry about it, because you have ARPA monies and you can take care of it. But
That's
again,
only
goes to being a problem. You're not addressing the situation. What you have is these expenses
Right.
are now, and they're going to be going on a continuing basis going forward. You don't want to use one-time revenues for recurring expenses. Another thought was just actually increase your revenues. It's not a big deal. You're making a guess anyways. Well, again,
Makes my brain hurt.
you want to be conservative in your approach, which is what we've tried to do, to say the revenues, year over year, I don't want to go more than 3 or 4% on revenues, just to keep in line with the expectations.
Prison mitigation's still in here, though, right?
It is.
That's another reason I'm here.
Yeah, I mean, we could overstate them, but when we're conservative, it
No, I
helps
agree with you,
generate the
yeah.
free cash for the next year and buys the capital items that we need or gives us some latitude to do something.
What were the assessments for the other two towns for King Philip this cycle?
Rentham was about 5%, and Plainville was higher.
It's in here.
Yeah, it's in the budget book, I just not,
Have you had any discussions with them about their intended?
yep, I had a meeting with Superintendent Zinni and both the other town administrators, and, they're,
Plainville is 5.98 and
Thank you.
Rentham is 5.03.
yeah, so 5 and 6%. I expect them both to fund both of those. And we've also had, some things that we couldn't have expected, 9 more kids at Tri-County, increase in the per pupil cost at the Norfolk Aggie, and possibly more students. I mean, there is some talk, I will tell you, there is some talk at the state level that a push by MMA to get the unrestricted government aid percentage up from 2.7 to 7.3. That's getting some talk. That number for us would be worth about $48,000. That would certainly help, but, we've typically budgeted the governor's number because we don't want to budget, again, something that's
Not as.
not sure. So, that could be to the good, and, that will help smooth out
Offset.
some other things.
Snow removal and
Oil. Yeah. So, I had some questions in this book, if that, or
Sure.
is that okay?
Yeah.
But I also, before we do that, I just wanted, I hear what you're saying. It's like you don't use, absolutely understand philosophically what you're saying. And if you win the lottery, I'm not suggesting that we go and buy the Porsche, right? I'm not suggesting that at all. But if you look at our free cash situation, we've nearly tripled our free cash. So what we have in free cash is a lot. And because of the way, it's not like your household budget, right? Where if you win the lottery, you can put all this into savings and keep this over here because you're going to do a little something, right? You can't do that because it has to go to free cash, right? It has to go somewhere. And so we've had some windfalls that are really beneficial to the town due to the hard work of the people in this room. And so our free cash has tripled or nearly tripled or in the tripling department. And so I get it that I'm not suggesting we buy a Porsche, but to have our free cash triple and to have all of these assets to the town and then say to the library you can't open on Saturdays, or to say to the school you have to cut a teacher, I know. But
I'm not saying either of those things
I know
either.
you're not, but I'm saying it's not like we took those earnings, and some were lucky and some were really calculated and intentional that benefited our town. And we can't say most of this goes to free cash, but these were going to really help, because then we're doing what, right? Does this make sense what I'm saying to you?
It does.
Correct, but the
And-
objective, again, that we were charged with from the previous meeting was we have a $200,000 differential, make it zero,
Right.
and don't use free cash. That's what we're trying to do.
And we totally understand if it's not what you're comfortable with, that's what we're here to talk about, and make some adjustments to get to something that people feel comfortable with. I wouldn't love the spending of free cash, but to me, if it's 20,000 or 30, it's such a small amount that, hopefully it's just a blip that we need to do this year and get on track.
And it's still a net of $1 million plus, or way $1 million plus.
Right.
It's still a net for free cash. It's the way we're talking about it is like we're taking it out of free cash, but we're kind of, if you look at it globally, we're kind of just putting less in. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so I'm a novice at this, so I'm going to ask people to bear with me because I'm new at this. And so I kind of went through budget by budget and like anything that caught my eye. And I know I should have told you earlier, and I'm really sorry.
Okay.
And so the one, every department had one little place that went up or one little whatever, like uniforms got really expensive and things like that, like really popped up. But I was looking at DPW and there were several places that went up, like boom. And so I just had some questions. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Blair, come on up to a microphone.
Everybody had one here or there, and unfortunately you had several that I didn't understand,
okay.
so I apologize.
Not a problem.
So I guess, first of all, I had administrative expenses. So I'm looking on page 74 of that preliminary budget report that we were given. So first, at the top, administrative expenses went from 39,000 to 80,000. I was just wanting that answered.
I don't have the same
What page you on?
page that you do.
74. Just a description, I'm on the budget history description.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not the same copy that I have.
I'm in
Huh? Yeah, I thought it did. I thought it
Department of
did too,
Public
so
Works.
Yep.
That's why I'm,
and then staffing history, and then budget history.
Which line item is,
I was just looking at the second one.
yeah.
Because it went up from 21 to 22 to 23. Thank you.
I think there was a realignment of where we were accounting for things, but let me,
Our admin budget actually went down.
yes.
But admin salaries is fine, but I was curious about, between 21 and 22, the admin expenses went up, and then it went up again.
Yes, so
I
what,
know we were looking to move engineering into that area from highway. I think that's the reason, but correct me if I'm wrong.
21, 22, we did a reallocation where department staff salaries came from. So we better fit Blair, myself, superintendent per division. So there was a change in there, so that raised it there.
Thank you. I'm going to keep going, is that okay?
Sure.
Street signs, I thought that was sleeping, that was a sleeping dog.
No, so we raised our budget last year for street signs, so not leaving the street name signs out of the picture, all of our other signs still need to get upgraded, stop, speed, all that. So that budget was raised last year. We're keeping the same amount.
Yeah, the first two columns here are actuals for the years before.
Yep.
And so we weren't changing the street sign budget from last year, this year to next year.
Yep, so it remains the same.
Remains the
And
same.
with our budget being
But-
so
but
material
we
heavy.
didn't. I'm sorry, but we didn't buy any street, I thought we agreed,
Not street signs, but stop signs,
Stop
yield
signs,
signs, signs that
Speed
have
limit signs
gotten,
and so forth.
We're still behind on those, so we need to meet the compliance regulation for
Refreshing signs,
reflectivity
other than-
for the other signs.
thank you. And then shade maintenance is that just
That's our-
5,000 every year it goes
Yes.
up?
So that's for all of our tree work within the right-of-way around town. And as you can drive just about any road in town and see that we're headed in the wrong direction there. We pick and choose as best we can, but trees are becoming a bigger issue every single year and certainly outpacing what we spend.
trees are dying more quickly than we can afford to take them down. And we have an obligation to take some of them down so they don't cause damage to a person or a vehicle or something. So we've been trying to incrementally increase that to try to
Keep pace.
keep pace. They would like far more. We told them no.
We try. We
We
try
tried.
really hard.
Awesome. I think that was the bulk of my questions.
Great.
I have
Just
a
trying to
question just while they're up here.
Yeah.
So one of y'all said that administration actually went down, but I'm looking and I'm looking at our packet for tonight, the current budget that with the little notes in the right-hand column for
Oh, yeah.
where monies have gone. And when I look at administration, it's up by 4.3% over, right? It's
Yeah.
207, present 240, and then 251, which seems like the opposite.
Salaries
down.
went up, but part of, excuse me, I got the wrong one, admin. Yes, we went up, we did go up 10,000. So we needed to add some professional licenses for our staff. That has increased, so we added some money in there to help us fund that. And then just some other professional license training and things. So we're requiring everybody to have their CDLs, have their hydraulics licenses. With changes of that coming down towards us, we're budgeting for.
So you're not hiring people with CDL, you're paying, the town's paying people to get their CDL?
The rules have changed.
Rules
how
just
we get
changed.
how we get CDLs. So now they have to attend a class. It's much more to it than there was last year.
In February of this year, the Federal Highway Administration deemed that you can no longer train your own employees and then take them to get their license. Now they actually have to go to an official truck
How
driver
many
school.
employees don't yet have their CDL that are employed by us?
There's probably a half a dozen, give or take, at this point. Normally, you would try to hire people that had them, but obviously, we're having difficulty finding people in general, so that has been tough.
But the
Yeah.
law was only changed this February, so last month?
Correct.
So the other issue we have.
Why weren't we,
Because people are just, they can be paid much more in the private sector to go drive a dump truck for.
no, I understand that, but if we have 6 employees that didn't have a CDL, why weren't we doing, why weren't?
So because of COVID, a lot of the DMV permitting, so all these guys have to go take a written test, pass their written test and take their driving test. Because of COVID, it's pushed back all the testing. So we have 4 guys that have their learner's permit, just can't get set up to go in to take the permit due to DMV being messed up from COVID.
And they're not grandfathered,
They are grandfathered, so they don't have to go through the new testing,
so you only have 2 that have to go through the new.
just can't get them in to take their driving test.
So which I'm less concerned about that than I am about the funding issue.
And one way around this in the future may be, and a couple of other towns around us have done that, have essentially sent one person to become an instructor so that you can now instruct in-house. A cost for one person versus every time you hire somebody without a license. So that may be a solution, a long-term solution to this problem.
So the only reason I was asking the question in the first place was you said it went down and it went up.
Yeah, I
so
was looking at the wrong one, sorry.
Is that something we could share with surrounding towns?
That's what we're looking at.
Yes,
Yep.
looking at, Franklin is starting that program now, so we're chasing that.
Kevin?
Most of my questions have been answered already. I had questions about that 28,000 coming out of the police, but you answered that. I had a question about the traffic on ClearGov. How have we established that it hasn't been getting traction? Is there metrics associated to that or just feedback?
Feedback, honestly. And I mean, we got, it was, I think it was a helpful tool for the capital budget, but using their operational budget tool has been challenging, would you say, sir?
Don't use it.
We could do the final budget in that. We didn't have a chance to pull it together for the preliminary, but I'm not feeling like it is going to be as useful as we hoped. And we looked at other things in IT, but frankly, we're upping our expenses in cybersecurity and other tracking services that are super critical, and this is the only thing we felt we could remove.
Maybe it's sad too, Kevin, though. I like the transparency of the ClearGov, but it's not a user-friendly tool.
Hasn't been as much as we hoped it would.
Nita, when you say it's not a user-friendly tool, you mean from the end-user standpoint or from the administrator standpoint?
Well, I was looking at, Todd, I was thinking from your use of it.
The administrator.
From the
yes.
administrators.
End user is fine.
End user is fine, other than when you look at it on the website, it looks like you've gone to a missing page because it's all white. You have to like click into your category before you get, it's not as intuitive
Right.
as you'd,
mean, these-
maybe I'm not as intuitive as I should be. It could be user error, but it's not, it can do what you want it to do. You just have to be a little cleverer than maybe I was.
But these were all hard choices. You didn't
Yeah.
come at any of these lightly, and we debated them quite a bit.
And there's hard choices before this page, like that happened.
When you went back to Ingrid and she identified that if she was to reduce her budget by $40,000, it would absolutely result in the loss of a position, did you happen to cite which position that would be?
She did not.
No.
I went to their budget presentation and there isn't There isn't there are additional positions in the budget, but the additional positions are in response to the mandates that so preschoolers have special needs, we have an obligation to educate them. Like, we can't say, you have special needs, go somewhere else. And so it's in response to things that we have to do. Like, they're not optional choices.
Well, I mean, I saw the presentation as well, and one of the things that was brought up was adding point 3 of a developmental math teacher, which I believe isn't mandated, but something that they've wanted to put back in for the last 5 years or so. So I'm not arguing the need for it. I'm just trying to figure out what's required to be having in
And
there
where
and
the
what we're
position-
trying to restore.
And it could probably be something like that. And just to advocate for the schools a little bit, math was the subject area the most hit by the pandemic in terms of interrupted learning.
It's really
ELA
hard to
kids
learn
seem to
remote.
keep up, but math was really, not just in Norfolk, but across the country. Math is the area that has been shown the most, or the least amount of progress for our students, so that it was really intentionally done to support our students in that area. I know, that's probably where I can't speak for them, but
Well, now that you've made yourself the de facto responder for educational questions, can you talk more about what the requirements are from a mental health perspective?
in terms of requirements, there aren't as many from the mental health perspective. In terms of need, the needs are great. And so the needs are great for our students and for our families. We have a lot of families who are really struggling. There are fewer mandates around those mental health expectations for our students, but schools are all sort of arguing out there for the leftover guidance counselors who don't have work because we don't have the guidance we have isn't enough. The school psychologists aren't enough because our kids, it has taken a toll on them. The pandemic has taken a toll on them or taken a toll on their families, which
family
then
unit.
trickles down to our students.
Blythe, do you happen to know if the positions that were added from a mental health perspective to the Norfolk Schools budget were funded by a grant or not?
There was some that was funded by ESSER, and if that came back around again, and then no one knows if it will, that could help this budget situation, but it's kind of like, what's the state going to do with UGA? We just don't know yet, so we can't assume that that will, and I wouldn't want to take money out and then find that it doesn't.
Right.
That was a shared social worker,
Yeah.
and that was with King Philip, I believe.
I think so.
Okay, I'll stop grilling Anita now. Sorry.
It's okay.
One thing I'd sort of to dovetail with what your conversation earlier about, well, we've sort of not necessarily won the lottery because it's more through hard work and some luck,
Yes.
but that there's extra money there. I just want to sort of, it will seem trite, I don't mean it to, but the expression rags to riches to rags again in 3 generations is as a result of people who said, well, I have these revolving budgetary needs, but I have this source of cash, and I'll just keep
Yep.
reaching into the cash, which is sort of why I'm on the one hand mindful that no, you don't want to end up in a situation where you can't have your library open on a Saturday, but you have all of this cash. But at the same time, I think that the question then should be asked, why can't I open my library on a Saturday notwithstanding the cash? And is there somewhere else in the budget that I should be addressing that issue from first, right?
Yes.
That's
Yes,
sort of the issue. And so
absolutely.
to Kevin, your point, and this is just
Sorry.
rumination, right? Like, we're just having a discussion, and then we have to go and think about it, right? And everybody in the town has to think about it, because they're the ones who have to vote the budget. But my issue, and you raised it, so maybe there's this 0.3 of a mathematic educator, and maybe it isn't mandated. But I'll tell you that if again, you know, if Ingrid says she can't make the cuts, or it's only this one cut, or it's really great presentations to the congressman, I'm going to want to see the cuts to the really great presentations to the congressman, and not to educating kids, especially post-pandemic. That's just my opinion. And maybe the ultimate answer is I've lost the word, but we'll say like a nexus between not cutting schooling, dipping a teeny tiny bit into cash, cutting someplace else, or trying to find a way to sort of share work someplace else. I'm mindful of the fact that I'm sure everybody who works for the town does great work, and that everything that's in our budget is absolutely necessary. But I'm also mindful of the fact that some things are which I know is actually not a thing, more necessary than other things, right? You can't have more of a superlative, but I just did it, so there you go. And for me, education is definitely one of them. I guess we kind of have to see what Ingrid has to say. I don't like it, though.
No, I'm not in support of the,
I don't like the cutting of the
no,
school.
I agree.
And I know that then leaves us. I can see you over the mask looking at me. What do I do then, Van Tyne? How do I make it balance then? But
I know what to do, but
I know.
it's up to what you guys want to.
Well, what would you do? You would just use free cash?
Maybe.
Look, if Ingrid had identified that there's the potential for a retirement to be able to cut that request in half of what we're asking of her, right? I think that's what you
Yep,
said, right?
yep.
$20,000 would have
Yep.
been what that retirement would equate to. Now we're talking about a $20,000 gap.
Yep.
And there's nothing else potential out there waning, things that might fall one way, might not fall another. That's our final number to be able to balance
So
this
I'll give
point.
you a heads up. We don't budget anymore for healthcare insurance. Okay, so if there's more people going on next year, the healthcare insurance, yes, I know where we're at now with the numbers, and my expectation is we land a little bit less people potentially, but we have new hires coming on. If they subscribe, there might have to be a bridge there. We have a debt payment that we got to figure out because we have $1 million of a band that we're going to be doing. Timing wise, I'll probably do a state note at the very end just to bridge a small amount, but we have $900,000 I got to account for in a band, which is about $100,000 per year to make up. Whether I do it in fiscal year 23 going forward is something separate to think about too. These are considerations that are not even in there that I'm being mindful in the overall scheme of things. If that makes sense.
It does.
Okay. So there's other things that always go on in the budget, not just here. There's always moving target. We have snow and ice this year, which is through the roof. Previous year, we didn't have snow and ice through the roof. Next year, it could be even higher. I have no idea what the weather's going to be. And I haven't looked at the almanac, and I don't want to look at the almanac
Fluffy, yeah.
given this year. So it kind of scares me in that respect. But again, if the prices of everything that we are seeing right now, which are anywhere from 5 to 15% higher than what we anticipated previously, and then we're trying to figure out this budget, next year budget is, even while we're operating, is going to be tough to bring in at these numbers that you guys are telling us to. Because again, I'm being mindful, lots of discussions, cutting back and forth. It's like, okay, we're going to take it out of overtime for there, and police, we're going to trim down even though we need an extra officer on duty. I mean, there's a lot of spinning plates, and unfortunately, again, we had a $200,000 gap, which was brought down from $900,000 of the overall ask. So we took in, everybody had asks of the top dollar amount, and Chuck's always going to be asking me even more, so I think he wants probably more cars in the fall, but we'll figure that out for the capital.
Single out poor Chief Stones.
Chuck,
Sitting all sad over there in the corner. Don't single him out.
Yeah, that's why our answer is a de minimis amount of free cash we recognize how important the school needs are, and if we could find it in another place, we would.
But the issue that I'm currently hearing, if I'm not mistaken, and I could be because my hearing isn't the greatest, is that we expect we're going to be, like, it's not in the budget, but we're pulling more from free cash soon.
We might be, depending on what happens in the world with some of these costs.
Well, with the costs and with the need for overtime and with the bond issue and with the debt and with and then we also have some, we're going to want, if we're going to get a fire station and we're going to add to the school, we want a higher bond rating in order to pay less in our note, which means we need more in, right?
We had a great meeting with Moody's on Monday. They wanted to do a credit update, and we expect a report out Thursday that they're going to remove the negative outlook on our rating that they'd placed just before the pandemic, because the town has done good work to live within budgets, get its stabilization up, get its free cash up, have a budget book, have a capital budget. So I'm less worried that that's an issue. I think we said to them, we have tried to wean off free cash. My take with them is 20 or 30,000 is not going to be something that they're going to be concerned about, as long as it stays small. And, you know, I think if we can meet the school's needs at this budget with a very small amount, making the other adjustments, I think we're off to a safe place starting this next year.
What's the superintendent's annual salary?
75,000.
That's what I'd do. I know we're not voting it. I know I'm not the guy. That's what I'd do. If we're going to get a better bond rating, and just this is thinking high level. I'm just one person, but and that is going to impact the amount of money that we can borrow to build the things that we need to build. And it's because of your hard work and yours and everybody else's in the town that sort of given evidence that we've weaned off of this idea of, oh, we've got a little, we'll just spend a little. And then we go and we say, oh, look it, we've just improved our bond rating, so now we're going to start, like, that's what I do. That's how I would live with my means. And maybe not just this guy. I mean, sure, this person's lovely, and maybe not him, maybe something else like it. It just feels like that's what I do. But I'm seeing the eyes over the mask, and I don't know that that's what you would do. That's just what I would do. I would find somewhere other than an educator.
Well, shade trees over an educator, I think. Though I know that's our safety risk, I understand.
We're not suggesting it. I mean, we put it on the table to talk about.
Yeah,
It's
no,
not
we're just
something
having
we
a conversation.
preference
Like, I'm
to do.
just, you can come back and tell me why it's so important, and I'll listen. I always do. I razzle. You bitch a little. I guess I'm not allowed to say bitch either.
Yeah, I mean,
but-
just be clear, our bond rating is not likely to go up. We have a AA+. It's just removing that negative outlook is a positive step. They recognize that our house is in order and the town is doing
But
a
it
good
could
job.
go down if they.
No. I don't see our rating going down.
We'll find out tomorrow, but unlikely that it will go down.
No, I don't mean tomorrow. I just mean if they were to say we're removing the negative outlook, and then later they decide to put it back on, it could go down in the future.
But we would have to be making some serious turns and like using all of our free cash to about, not all of it, but a large amount.
They don't only look at just the financials.
No, I understand that,
They look
but they
at the
do
whole-
look at it. And
they look at the
we
whole
spend a
town.
significant amount of time telling the public that that's what they do.
But
And
they
then
also
to
look at
do
the-
an about face and say, well, but now I want to access free cash, so now they don't actually look at it. It's going to be somewhat problematic for some people, myself included.
But, you know, on a going forward basis, obviously, you know, we contribute, we try and get as much free cash in, you know, when we get the free cash certified come June 30th. And then we use some of those monies to help offset for some of the capital costs, things of that sort. And, you know, the trend is to always fund a couple of things that are helpful because they go towards our fund balance, which, by the way, has increased from 5.8% to 11% with this free cash certification that we just recently went through, which also contributes to the positive outlook that we're
Right.
getting from Moody's. And it's not only that, it's increased permits, it's increased building, it's a, you know, do you have infrastructure coming in? Do you have an Amazon coming in? Do you have other things that are coming into the community?
Yeah, well, now we're just going sideways.
Well, I'm just saying,
Table's over there.
Right, exactly. Just lighting things
what's
on
going
fire
on in
as
your
you leave
community?
the room.
What's the good, what's the bad? And when we were going over all the questions, there wasn't really a lot of bad for us. It was all really good, especially year over year with the numbers of permits that are being asked for and requested also contributes to that factor as well. And we are going to put more monies into the stabilization fund. We are going to put more monies into the OPEB. The idea here is that we're going to target an amount and try and be consistent year over year to keep increasing that. So at the end of the year, the stabilization fund approximates about 5% of what we budget. And it just makes sense to keep doing that. If we can get to 10%, that'd be fantastic. Norfolk being the vanilla town that we are, I don't see that happening all too fast. Again, unless the dynamics change such that we have a huge influx of commercial base to help offset that amount. We're a quiet community that's pretty much managerial in nature and somewhat bedroom quiet.
But we're wicked close to 5. We're wicked close
To what?
to 5%.
Oh, yeah,
We're climbing the mountain.
So our fund balance this year is 11% all in, which puts us over, which is a nice number to have. I'm talking about just the stabilization fund itself.
Right.
Being the 5%.
But it's at like 4.8 or something.
Yes, yep.
Yeah.
I think we've also been conservative in other areas, like, with 3 million, we didn't just go out on spending spree. We said we're only going to spend part of it. We're going to save some for balancing a budget or snow next year or whatever comes up, so that the town has the ability to make choices.
I'm super uncomfortable asking the schools to take any cut beyond what they've done.
Even if they have a retirement coming up?
Ingrid gives her money back, does she not? If she,
Were they able to this past year?
She usually does.
Yeah, I know, I'm just curious.
No, I was just saying generally.
I'm saying if she has the retirement, she's going to she gives the money back.
It'll go to snow removal.
Inevitably.
Is this true? Maybe I think that's true.
I think it's, put it this way, every meeting that I've ever been to where she's come or gone to bat for things, she's always said if she has money left over, she gives it back, as opposed to the
So
people who run around
cognizant
and
that
buying
she's the biggest.
crates of big pens. And
She's very, very careful and the biggest driver in the town.
for the biggest budget.
The biggest budget in the town, and she knows that and takes that responsibility seriously.
To be clear, though, the endeavor that we're going through now is to present the balanced budget at town meeting, right? With the
Yes.
understanding that obviously there will be funding that we're going to have the ability to play with come the fall and come next year. But as it pertains to right now, this gap has to be filled some way, shape, or form. And if she says that she understands definitively that there's going to be a $20,000 savings from a retirement, I would rather account for that now so that we don't have to dip into free cash.
But
as
she
much.
didn't say that there's a possible, is what I heard.
Completely understand that too. Yeah, this is all based on.
If it's
she can-
definitive, I'm all in.
Yeah. Okay.
Possible.
Just making sure.
Possible, so then that
Well, I guess
person
it
doesn't
depends on
retire,
the-
and then now she has to do something more
And now there's a
drastic.
gap to make up, right? Don't want to put her in that position either. Completely agree.
Well, what's it that's being retired? If it were someone who is definitely retiring, isn't the next, are you talking about the delta between their salary and
And
the
a new,
replacement?
and a new
Okay.
person. And that delta could give you a $20,000.
And that's different. Yep, I
Yep.
see that. I would agree with
But we're
that.
going to stay in touch about that.
When's the next, it's 2 weeks from now, right? And is she coming
Next week, on the 5th.
the 5th? Yeah.
Yep, to talk about the MSBA submission, to get approval for that
Right.
again. And I have it on the agenda to possibly recommend, you guys to
Sure.
vote on the budget.
Yes.
So we were hoping to get some guidance tonight so we could bring that back to you on Tuesday.
Well, we're just having a discussion. I am just one person. I like the idea, and maybe it's another call with Ingrid or conversation next week, if not before. I agree with Kevin's idea. If it was a sure thing, fine. Otherwise, I'm not comfortable with it. And then I think it goes down to whether you dip entirely into free cash, knowing that that's where you're going to be going the rest of the time to fill all the other boogeyman stuff we've been hearing about tonight, or whether you keep cutting. The less free cash, the better, in my opinion. But that's why they pay you.
I mean, if we lay people off, don't forget, we're going to have an unemployment hit. So what's the
Right.
real savings?
Right. Well, that's a great point. So what is the real savings?
Yeah, it may not be what you'd hope for. That's why I'd rather stay with the slate of people that we have and not incur another cost that's, completely avoidable.
Well, you're talking about the delta.
Yeah.
That's different than an unavoidable cost, right?
Well,
Like if
we can avoid-
hypothetically, someone's paid $75,000 and the fun employment for them would be 30.
Right.
So then the swing is 45.
Yes, but then do we keep the grounds position after all? That's 50 back, plus the unemployment, you're really at the same place.
If you kept the grounds position, which you've already said you don't think you need.
Well, no, let me be clear, I do think we need it, it's just that I just don't think we've been able to fill it, and so I'd rather not fill a position for someone we don't have than cut somebody who's doing, the work that we need to get done, is what I'm saying. If all in, cutting a grounds position, cutting the superintendent means you're saving 75, but you got, say, 25 in unemployment, 25 and 50 for that position is the same 75. And so that's how
If you were only getting rid of the one. I got it.
Todd, you had mentioned that during the advisory board meeting, there was discussion about the use, I think it was Mr. Garrity who brought it up, the use of ARPA funds to be able to address some of the needs that are COVID-related from an education perspective. Tell me about what the difference would be between trying to apply ARPA funds to cover that gap versus us using free cash to the town.
No difference. The ARPA funds are, I'd have to go through federal, so we have a portion of our funds so we have $3.5 million basically in round numbers total. 1.2 is town direct, 1.2 plus the 100 and change that we can get from the Norfolk County goes under a $10 million exemption amount. So we can use it for governmental purposes. With a few exceptions, we can't fund debt items, we can't fund stabilization funds, things of that sort, or retirements, things of that nature. But it can be used for any governmental services after that. So whether it's for salaries or expenses, even in a budget to maintain it. So it's another way of free cash potentially, but it's not part of the free cash certification
Yeah, it's possible.
process.
It could be instead of free cash, if that feels better, that's,
So I just wanted to, because I'll forget, so I understand that at least maybe potentially offsets some of the bond considerations, but it's basically the same thing, because unless you're just, creating these positions for 1 year, whenever the ARPA funds go away, you still have
Still one-time revenue for a recurring expense. Yes, absolutely.
I mean,
Yep.
just to make sure that I understood
You do.
that was it.
Yep.
Like, that's what you had said at the beginning, so.
That made me think of a question I had. Advisory board had a surplus of $50,000.
that's a reserve fund?
Reserve fund.
The reserve
A
fund.
reserve fund. What is that potentially used for?
Emergency situations such as a boiler blows up and we don't have something readily available, whoever needs to get that fixed calls an
Out of
advisory
advisory.
meeting.
Without having to go back
Right, so
to
they
town
generally
meeting.
turn it back. We did use it for a fire truck the year before last, a repaired engine too. But it has to be an emergency and unforeseen expense, and they have discretion over that. Generally, they turn it back. It's simply a way to, because if you didn't have it, you're talking about a town meeting to deal with a,
A small.
boiler.
A small.
This is-
Emergency.
Okay.
yeah,
Thank
This
you.
is the,
yeah.
it's not a slush fund,
Yeah, I remember this now.
but some folks felt that it was like a double secret slush fund, but it actually exists so that you don't have to drag everyone in for an emergency town meeting when a boiler blows. And at the end of the year, if they don't use it for that, then it goes back and then it goes off again.
Thank you.
Right.
Probably shouldn't have said that, but I don't care. So there it is.
So we'll work with the schools and see if they're
I'd
having
love to
better
know more
information.
about the retirement issue, because I will say that I'm hugely not comfortable with spending just from but if it's a smaller delta, I become incrementally more comfortable.
I think, and I have no personal information about the situation, it just, if you hear rumors that somebody's going to retire, you can't exactly knock on their door and say.
No.
And so.
No, but
her hands could be tied.
No, it's
I
very-
don't
it
know the
could be-
circumstances,
Yep, it
so.
could very well be that her hands are tied and then we've got to do something else, but it would be
Anything
great.
short of, I know for a fact this individual has identified that they are
No, they have
definitely
to
gonna
write a
retire.
letter and-
Yeah, I don't think that any of us would feel
I agree.
comfortable with marking that down as something that we want to bank on.
I mean, we're already banking on some nebulous, ideas in terms of like that 10,000 increase for the 200, right? Like you increased, I know it's still
Excise.
conservative, but your excise, you increased that. We've got the prison mitigation, which I know that and lectern are going to be the two things that people remember me for. Which I also don't know. And then you don't know what's going to be, you're going to need to spend in all of the other areas. So I get, we can't also be gambling on people retiring. Could have, that would be bad.
Could gamble. Could put them in a really
Coming
tight
to work
spot.
and there's a happy retirement cake there for you.
exactly.
I'm not retired. Yes, you are.
Here you go.
Congratulations.
Brochures for Florida. Actually sounds really nice. So, maybe some more information. I mean, you've heard our thoughts. I know you have thoughts, but I'd love to know more about, I just don't love the idea, whatever, I've said it a million times. There's things that also impact our rating and why people would want to live here. And especially post-pandemic, the right thing to do relative to education. So
We understand.
that's my story. We good? Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Do we need to,
Oh, we have to adjourn.
yeah, we did.
Oh, that would be good.
Wait, that's it, right?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.